There's something about electronic music and its endless possibilities that even from back when I was a kid would create the strongest impression on me. There have been many albums from different genres I grew up with, and for the most part I would see myself returning in different types of electronic releases. One of those combinations that would always manage to blow my mind is catchy and energetic electronic releases with moody and melancholic atmosphere, two worlds colliding and putting you in a weird position on how to react and feel. And arguably what's primarily the genre that would come to mind is darkwave and all of its subgenres, which to their credit fully succeed on having those conflicted emotions. Sometimes the results might be a bit more chill and have a sort of relaxing mood to them, other times you might get more energetic acts whose darker undertones lead to feelings of frustration and anger. But what has been even more impressive for me is when this is managed with dance beats, and in general forms of electronic music that are not really meant to emit those kinds of darker emotions. One of those artists that would blow me away from back when I was a kid was Moby. Say what you want about Moby, I find his approach on electronic music and the range of emotions it can create absolutely fascinating. And then there's this Greek group called Stereonova. To this day, the unique blend of catchy beats with utterly depressing melodies and themes is something that I struggle to find and executed in such a fashion. There have been other Greek acts that succeed on evoking this urban depressing feel of living in the hellish landscape of Greece and this feeling of closure and isolation, but I was still searching for years for an album that would make me feel like back when I would listen to Stereonova, not really knowing what they were saying back then, but being captivated on how their music made me wanna dance and cry at the same time. And it's been years, but the closest I got into that feeling was with the German duo Klangstabil and their 2004 album Taking Nothing Seriously. It's actually one of the very few times, if not ever, where I would listen to an album for the very first time and instantly come to the conclusion that this is one of my favorite albums of all time. When I listened to it for the first time and it ended, I immediately put it on back again and listened to it for a second time and just couldn't really believe that this was happening. I felt so glad and fortunate that I discovered this. And while it's the closest I can think of to this urban feeling that I would get with Stereonova, and there's this sense of nostalgia, Taking Nothing Seriously makes an impact in ways that I was not expecting. Because it's like it's taking the formula of Stereonova and turning it into something extremely harsh, loud and intense. Considering that at this period of time when I first listened to it I was already accustomed to more extreme subgenres of electronic music, not only was I accustomed to its harsh sounds and volume, but it was also a welcome change as an exploration of further capabilities in rhythmic noise that I can't really think of any other album in its caliber reaching to that extent. Even looking at the entire catalogue of Klangstabil, Taking Nothing Seriously differs on so many levels. On their first albums it seems like it took a while to find their footing, with works that were still pretty good, but were more to the experimental side, also incorporating a lot of elements of chiptune. Bizarre indeed, but you still have those elements of power noise and raw industrial sounds. Taking Nothing Seriously is a massive leap in terms of quality and a change of mood, way more distinct and also quite unrecognizable compared to their previous efforts. After that, their last two albums seem to embrace the moody and melancholic approach that we get on Taking Nothing Seriously, but the volume, the rawness and harshness have been toned down quite a lot. They're still really solid albums, definitely some of the best they've done, but it's Taking Nothing Seriously that feels like the defining middle point of those two eras, blending together the elements of electro-industrial and noise in an album that even Klangstabil managed to create only once. This is another release that we got from the label ANT-ZEN, one that I have mentioned in previous videos as I consider to be an excellent label when it comes to finding electronic and industrial releases, and this right here is one of the prime and most perfect examples. And as far as many of its elements can sound pretty familiar in terms of 2000s urban aesthetics, it's one of the very few occasions where I see it being done in such an intriguing and magnificent fashion, making it stand out not only for the label but also for the group itself, and it is a massive curveball compared to anything else they've done beforehand, and also the album that puts them on the spot as a project that has something more to offer outside of the formula of industrial music. Weirdly enough, it's one of the few albums that is not available on Spotify, but a massive compilation contains certain tracks of the album that showcase their importance throughout their career. The one thing that this album suffers from is its vinyl version. In a 2000s fashion, as it would happen with many releases at the time, for some reason 2 tracks out of the album are not included on the vinyl version. And while a reason to leave not being included is fine, I guess, I mean, if I had to pick one track that is the weakest out of the album, it would be this one. Not including Push Yourself is ludicrous. I might say this is the greatest moment in the album. It's such an exceptional and captivating song, and excluding from the vinyl version such a pivotal song makes the vinyl not so worth it in my opinion, let alone the fact that it's rare to find and pretty expensive. And the one thing the CD makes absolutely certain is that it's extremely loud and will blow your ears off. Right off the bat, the beat of You May Start gives the impression of the gain being a little higher of what you might be used to, but it becomes even more apparent when the bass synths just hit you with a blast just a few seconds in, alongside the really standout bell sound and loud vocals as well. The track in its core feels like a somewhat standard approach of darkwave, and I'd say it's one of the main elements that we see dominating their next 2 releases, as it has this really moody atmosphere and dark undertones that is enhanced as the song progresses with the inclusion of string arrangements and old school plucky synths. But it's the rawness of the sound and the loudness that makes this so refreshing, making the whole production be so much in your face with almost every sound cranked to the max. Gives this bigger emphasis on its emotional impact, the way it hits you, the way it feels unapologetic to communicate to the listener a sense of melancholy through sheer amounts of noise. This, in my opinion, is the main element that most of the tracks in this album share that makes Taking Nothing Seriously more special. If the poetic type spoken word lyrics that are excellent and the beautiful melodies were not enough, the extra oomph on the production elevates the experience on adding impact to all of its different soundscapes. Another thing that I find really interesting about You May Start is that a big portion of the song, almost its entire second half, is completely instrumental. Instead of cutting the track short, You May Start keeps on going and going and gives more room for its different melodic elements to shine once again. And the great thing is that instead of making the song drag out, it's paced in an excellent way, adding to the captivating nature throughout its runtime. Many of the parts feel well crafted, and fortunately this is the case with lots of other tracks over here. Case in point is the next song, Between. The second half contains this outstanding sampling alongside a siren sound that just keeps going and going, and throughout its runtime, the track keeps its interest by toying with the frequencies of the beat and the piano melody, at times just keeping the highs and then going back to louder low frequencies, with some occasions having the kick being so overbearing that any time it plays, it would cover pretty much any other sound. It's incredible how unapologetic this album it can be when it comes to the way it toys with its different sounds and how it makes every single one of its ideas work in its benefit no matter how overwhelming it might feel. The other thing that makes Between so intriguing is how much different it is compared to You May Start. While You May Start is this slow and moody track that shows a different take on the formula of darkwave, Between is a more fast-paced and dynamic song, more rhythmic and more aggressive, and this is the main track where I made the connection with Stereo Nova. The piano melody, this beat, and especially those really fast, almost rap-like spoken word vocal deliveries gave me such a strong Stereo Nova vibe. But like I said, it's like a noisier, more unhinged version that it elevates itself in a quite different instrumental second half that feels really well crafted. Even the sample with a phone call at the end gives such a strong impact, the way the song abruptly transitions to it, and just how loud it is. Even in this moment the gain is to the max and simply adds to the intriguing factor. Once again, with the next song, Gloomy Day, the album shows you that it's full of surprises. Completely different the way it starts in terms of volume and intensity, as everything is toned down quite a bit, and then you have the vocals that are this whispery spoken word delivery that is in Spanish. The track picks up in a sudden manner, with the beat being extremely aggressive, and then the vocals are these extreme screams that are filled with pain and sorrow. It sounds almost depressing, and it really catches you off guard. The melodic aspect once again steals the show the way it captivates you, and how all of the additional melodies elevate the experience and manage to create such conflicting emotions. On one hand, the beginning is almost calming, kinda giving you a break from the intensity of the previous two tracks. It holds you by the hand, it's comforting. And then the screams feel hopeless, but the additional melodical parts that play at the same time are the opposite. They feel kinda hopeful. And then the final instrumental section is like somewhat blissful. It's such a strange way to mess with your emotions. And because of how weird it makes me feel every single time, being unsure on how it makes me feel, it becomes a pretty standout and special moment in the album, even if it's not one of my personal favorites. The track A Difference That's For All To See is by far the biggest curveball in this album. Completely different compared to anything else this album contains, and it's the main moment that shows the massive variety of this album when it comes to sounds and influences. By far being the most experimental moment in the album, the track spends a big portion of its runtime being this really minimal and kinda haunting ambient melody. But the gain is still pretty high, that part doesn't change, it still gets you in the mood, and you might think that this is gonna be the entire thing, but you're not prepared to what's coming next. All of a sudden, you hear screeching feedback, and the song abruptly transitions into an insanely loud grindcore track, with drums that are like all over the place, and the vocals are this rapid fire insane rapping that after a while it becomes indistinguishable from the rest of the noise, and you can't really tell what's going on. It's so messy. This goes for more than a minute, it's relentless, and it's one of the most insane experimental grindcore parts. I don't even know how to describe this, but the fact that this comes out of nowhere after a couple of minutes of minimal dark ambience is just crazy. Like, how do you even come up with this? While it's not one of the greatest tracks in my opinion, it's undoubtedly one of the most stand out for its uniqueness and its creativity. Haven't heard anything like this, and definitely didn't expect this for an album that gave no signs whatsoever that it could contain such a weird track. Away keeps on with the multilingual approach that I consider to be another interesting part of the duo, as in this one we get a few vocals in German. In the vast majority you would simply consider this an instrumental song, and it's this very bleak electronic piece, definitely the most calm moment in the album in terms of its loudness, and it doesn't have a single moment of extreme jumps in gain and distortion. It has this very moody urban aesthetic that is one of the elements that I would love back in the day from the sound of Stereo Nova, and this is one of those moments that gets me back to this nostalgic feeling. The string arrangements sound heavily depressing, and once again, it's really astonishing how all of the additional elements as the song goes on makes the whole experience engaging from start to finish. The way all of its additional sounds come and go makes it feel refreshing and pass by sooner than expected. Push Yourself is such a masterpiece of a song. From its semi-optimistic lyrics surrounded by mentions of a world filled with struggles in which you have to fight your way through, to the balance of noise and melancholic sounds, this track has it all. The development to more harsh vocals filled with feedback leading to an explosion of noise with the entire mix filled with just high frequencies is a moment that gives me shivers every single time. One of those moments where loudness succeeds on creating such a strong impact. The moment where the track blasts all of its sounds in your face is absolutely magical. The beat itself is exceptional, all of the string arrangements sound fantastic and pretty sad. The lengthy instrumental section at the end is still structured in a way that doesn't feel unnecessary, and it's just a blast, always filling me with so many emotions. I could go on more and more about this track, but I can't praise it enough. Just listen to it. I consider this one of the most phenomenal tracks I can ever think of. It's that much exceptional for me. Reason to Live is the only instrumental track over here, and once again it's this really nice blend of loud production with a heavy industrial beat and lots of moody melodies. It contains lots of the elements that make this such an exceptional album, but I'd say that this is the only moment where it doesn't feel like its additions become all that much impactful to keep the pacing flow smoothly from start to finish. So while this is a great song, I consider this to be the one and only moment in this album that I don't feel is particularly exceptional. But the finale ends things with a strong bang. Kilo Lifeforms is one of the most iconic and most special moments in Klangstabil's entire career. Right off the bat, the loud vocals catch you off guard after the long fade out of the previous song. The melody is one of the most unique aspects about this track, as the album seems to end things off with the most blissful and peaceful sounding melody of the whole project, coming in great antithesis with the sinister undertone of the lyrical context about killing all life forms. The beat is this borderline power noise mayhem, and as it goes on, the vocals become progressively more harsh, and the track takes a slightly experimental approach with effects covering huge portion of the rest of the mix. It becomes quite unhinged in the best way possible, but the end gives you a break from all the chaos. The main melody goes back to normal, and the album ends with this weird feeling. After all of the sorrow and bleakness and confusion, the bliss of Kilo Lifeforms just make you want to smile. What an interesting choice for a final track, and what a track listing in general. I'm confident that anyone who will listen to this album would come off finding something exceptional and feeling in ways you might never thought of. You might get confused, be weirded out, be put off, but I reassure you, this is a once in a lifetime experience. While all of its elements feel familiar, the combinations and influences make this album one of a kind, and while you might not find it as impactful as it is for me, I strongly encourage you to give this album a shot if you haven't already. Let it play loud, confuse you, surprise you, and suck you in its hopeless, industrialized soundscapes. And that's why taking nothing seriously is, in my opinion, an essential. Let me know what you think of this album down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.